All right. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Master Gardener class here in Montgomery County. Um, tonight we're going to be talking about basic entomology, and I'll just keep it short and sweet. We've got David Cook, happily retired, sorely missed, extension agent, and spent the majority of his career in Montgomery County and at the lab and such like that. So thank you, David, for coming tonight. We really appreciate it. And so I'll let you take it from here.
You bet. Well, thank you, Carla.
You're welcome.
Insects is always been a hot topic. Whether you like the insects or call them bugs or not, anywhere you live on this planet, you're going to run into some type of insect. Particularly if you're a master gardener and you get involved in gardening, any aspect of gardening, whether it's actually a vegetable garden or growing herbs or flowers, anything you do with a landscape, you're going to unintentionally invite these little critters we call insects. Now, fortunately, most insects we view as beneficial creatures. Some I just call innocent bystanders. They're just there. The beneficials could be excellent pollinators of plants, which are greatly needed and necessary. And we couldn't live without these insects. We couldn't exist on this planet Earth without these type insects. But there are several insects that are what we call phytophagous, and that means they're creatures that they're plant eaters, and they get all their energy and able to reproduce because they feed on plants, and the energy of the sun first goes to plants, and they eat those plants, and the energy is transferred in their bodies. So most insects that feed on plants can do quite a bit of damage. Unfortunately, the way we landscape and way we grow crops, we do a lot of monoculture type planting of the same plant species or plant families over and over again. So we make these plants easily accessible to these creatures that are going to feed. And so man has basically been involved in the production of food plants for, they estimate, over 10,000 years. And I guarantee we've had pests for that long. And we've been trying to manage. I don't like the word control. Control is very difficult. And because insects are a part of a necessary food chain that many other creatures exist because they get their energy from eating insects. So, but we like to manage these insects so we don't see a lot of damage. Some of it is just aesthetics, the way our plants look. Plants aren't very vain. They can actually sustain quite a bit of feeding injury. Some you'll see later in this program can be quite serious and cause death of annuals, perennials, and large trees. So we'll get started on this, and I hope you'll enjoy this program. We'll take a break, a little over an hour through it, and then continue. I think you will not be bored. Okay. Now let's see if we can get this. I'm trying to get my, okay. If I ever ask somebody this question, what is an insect? I generally get a silent room and a pause. Well, most people don't realize that we don't think of insects as animals. We think of other animals like companion animals, dogs, cats, maybe horses, farm animals, animals we see in zoos, a lot of birds as true animals, but insects are true animals. And it's interesting that about 80% of all known animals fall under this category of insects. So they're unusual animals. They cannot regulate their body temperature, so they're classified as a cold-blooded animal, which means the consumption of food does not produce a byproduct of heat. So they cannot control. They can control their body core temperature two different ways, by migrating away or actually hibernating. So they have to move in and out of a habitat. Insects will get thirsty, and if you've ever had a bird bath or sometimes a hummingbird feeder, you may actually see insects going to that and getting a drink of water to quench their thirst. They have a skeleton, but it's on their outside and is called an exoskeleton. Serves the same function as all other skeletons that animals have, even though most of them are on their inside. It allows for body movement. They have muscle tissues that are connected internally to their exoskeleton. It is composed of different type plates, and it allows for body movement. But the most important thing, it serves as a kind of coating of armor. It protects them mainly from desiccation, drying out. To be a true insect, you have to have three distinct, even though sometimes they're not distinct, usually same, a head, a thorax, and an abdomen. Insects also have three pair of legs, even though in some immature stages, such as caterpillars and other insects, the larval stage may show several other legs, small stubby legs we call prolegs, as in caterpillars, but these are not true appendages that we call legs, and they lose those as an adult. Most insects do have wings. The wings and the legs, anything that is used for movement will be attached to the middle part of the body called the thorax. And most insects will have two pair of wings, that is 4 wings. But there's one group of insects that has only 1 pair, and some never have wings at all when they reach a mature stage. So here's just a little diagram. This would be a wasp in the insect order Hymenoptera. And the head, with ants and wasps and bees, you can distinctly see, because of the thin waist, an attachment. It's a thread-like attachment, and some wasps are called thread waist wasps because it's very narrow. But you can see in this photo that the wings and legs are attached to the thorax. Okay, insects, again, I said, are animals, so they're in the big kingdom. They're not in the plant kingdom, they're Animalia. So they're classified as an animal. Now, there are millions of different types of insects, and new species are being discovered basically every day. A lot by doctorate, PhD level entomologists in all different fields of entomology, entomologists that study forest trees, or medical entomologists, entomologists that study crops, all different aspects of entomology. And a lot of graduate students and doctorate students discover an insect that has never been reported before. That's pretty interesting, I think. So they belong to a group, still a very large group, beneath the Animalia kingdom, called a phylum, and this Arthropoda. And this includes a lot of animals that are not true insects. Now, all insects are in this phylum, but all the creatures in this phylum called Arthropoda are not true insects. For example, shrimp and crab, crawfish, centipedes, millipedes, spiders, mites. They also, because they do have segmented legs, segmented bodies, and exoskeletons. So to further describe and define what an insect is, scientists had divided insects into several different orders. And these are traditionally based on physical characteristics, how similar they are. So if you saw a really pretty butterfly flying around and a moth, they would look kind of similar. So they're put in an order. Ants, bees, and wasps look physically similar, so they're in an order. A lot of flies are similar looking to other flies, even though sometimes insects in certain orders don't look like they belong there. There are some orders that are very small because the insects are very unusual. So you're going to learn, this is the first thing I want you to learn today, besides what is an insect, is that we're going to look at the next slide, some insect orders, very common ones. If the order, which is a Greek word, the name of the order has to physically describe a characteristic of the insect. So that's very helpful when if you take a class in entomology. So you will see that Greek word Ptera, which actually means a wing. So let's look at several different types of wings. Butterflies have beautiful wings because they have what we call scales, which are modified hairs. The wing on the left, the front and the hind wing, are from actually a true bug. And if you notice the orange black wing on the top left, it actually is kind of divided into two type wings. It is one wing, but the texture and the color looks different. That is a type of true bug. So their wings are a little bit different. The wing on the far right is from a cicada. Now, if the butterfly wing had all the scales, the modified hairs removed, it would kind of look like a cicada wing. It would be a membrane with these hollow vein type structures, which fluids are pumped into to stiffen up the wings. So there's a misconception that if scales come off a butterfly wing, that will interfere with the ability of the butterfly to fly, but that's actually not true. Butterflies don't live very long, and you might see some at the end of the summer with some severely damaged wings, but they can still fly very good. Okay, now there's no pictures here, so I want you to kind of think for a moment what this group of insects. Now, I got to remember, if the word, like the first word you see, Coleoptera, you see Ptera, so that means in that insect order, these insects will have wings, and generally the wings appear in the adult stage. Now, if you see a letter A in front of the letter P, A meaning not or no, there are no wings, we'll look at an insect order, and that shows insects that never have wings. So you can see the words actually are descriptive word. So coleus, which is part of Coleoptera, means a wing cover that is kind of a hard sheath, a covering. This is our largest group of insects, and these are beetles. Now, the name refers to the part of the wing covers, that part of the exoskeleton. And underneath that, you can see where the membrane type wings, which are used for flying, they actually look much larger than the other wings in the air, but they actually fold up. It's quite a process, and it does this in a blink of an eye. When a beetle or an insect that wants to fly, the hard sheath wing covers are hinged, and they raise up kind of like flaps on an airplane, and the membrane wings unfold rapidly. And this happens if you look, you wouldn't even notice this, so they can take off pretty quick. So Coleoptera, the largest number of species of insects in that order, largest order of insects. Okay, Lepidoptera, this is lepidus means hair, and I already kind of give you a clue on that. These are our beautiful butterflies, and moths are also included in this. Diptera, in the first part of that word, di meaning two. So this is an insect that in the adult stage, they only have two wings, so one pair of wings. And most people wouldn't even realize that these are actually flies. So next time you see a mosquito, a mosquito is a type of a biting fly. They're in the insect order Diptera because they only have actually two wings. Even though mosquito doesn't technically look like a fly, it is technically a scientific word. And so it is a biting type fly. Okay, the Hymenoptera, hymen means membrane, and you still see Ptera there. So these are insects that have a membrane type wing. And these are very familiar, ants, bees, and wasps are in the insect order Hymenoptera. Now we come to a word that has the letter A in front of Ptera, meaning there are no wings. So Siphonoptera, siphon, it refers to a hollow tube type structure, where this refers not to their wing, but to their mouth part. So this insect, you can think, what is an insect that doesn't have wings, but will bite and actually can hop or jump? These are fleas. So it's interesting how the insect order does describe a physical characteristic of all the insects that belong to that group, that order. Okay, these numbers I could probably bump up almost every day. So this gives you kind of a little estimation of the number of individual species. There are many more beetles than 350,000 beetles on this planet, but years ago there had been actually 350,000 species identified. So who would ever think that we have probably well over now 120,000 different species of flies? And butterflies is 180,000, wasps, bees, and ants 150, and this keeps going on and on and on. So, but these numbers can get bumped up every day. So there's no really accurate count of how many exact species at one moment in time. It's difficult to pinpoint that. But what if I said, how many insects are there totally in the world? Now, this is a scary number. I researched this, and it took me a while to come up with this. So this is pretty interesting. So let's say, as an estimate, there's approximately 10 million individual insects per acre of land. You could, how could that be? Well, there are some insects that are so tiny, and most insects are actually very tiny, almost microscopic. Example, in the palm of my hand, I could hold probably close to a million little insects called springtails. And I don't know if you've ever heard of those, but they're so tiny, they're about the size of the period after the word land at the end of these sentences, and even smaller. And so they're extremely tiny, and one of the most common insects we have on this planet. They're harmless. They actually feed on what we call decaying organic matter, detritus, and they help recycle nutrients back in the soil. They live under a leaf litter. Sometimes if leaves accumulate around the door or sliding glass door of a house, they can actually reproduce greatly in that moist environment, and sometimes hop inside your house, and people might mistake them for little tiny fleas, but they don't resemble a flea at all. So you could easily have 10 million insects per acre of land, and that's just on the average, because entomologists have done this type of population surveys all across this planet. So we estimate that. So, but how many acres of land are there on planet Earth? We're not even including aquatic insects here. Earth's surface area of land is 36.48 billion acres, so about 36.5 billion acres on this planet. So do the math. We're going to multiply 10 million. If you do this on your cell phone, it'll probably just explode and catch on fire. The number is way too big. So here's 10 million times 36,480,000,000. And that's the number there. You can see how many digits are in this. Wow, that's a big number. I had to look up how to even pronounce this number. 364 quintillion 800 quadrillion insects. So that's a good trivia question if it ever comes up in a conversation. So how do insects grow? This is something else you need to learn, and it's very simple. There's two different types of growth stages in insects, and one is called gradual metamorphosis, and it's also called simple metamorphosis. And metamorphosis, all that means is change in shape. So as in insects where the immature stage looks very similar in appearance to the adult, of course they're smaller, and some of these will not have wings, and sexually they're immature. So in this type of development, there's an egg, followed by a series of growth stages we call nipple stages. And the end stage, the last stage, is you'll have an adult. And when you have an adult insect, that's as large as it's going to be. So if you saw, say, a beetle, and it's a very tiny beetle, and it was fully developed as an adult beetle, that beetle is not going to get any larger. That the exoskeleton will restrict its size. So there is no, notice the last sentence here, there's no what we call a pupal stage where there is a really change in shape. So this is gradual change in shape, not complete change in shape. So we'll show you an idea on this, how this happens. And the examples are aphids, crickets, termites, true bugs, cockroaches, grasshoppers. We'll start out with an egg hatches.
Yes.
And this could actually hatch inside the female insect as it does with aphids. Very unusual. So the aphids actually what we say we give live birth. So we have an egg, and then we have an insect we call a nymph. And right behind the head, there is a wing pad where the last thing to physically grow on these type insects is a wing, and it will grow and extend out. And then the wing will cover the entire body of the insect, and it will darken and harden. And then the exoskeleton will become very firm. So it's a very simple egg, nymph, adult stage. And with these type insects, generally the nymph, the immature stage, if they're plant feeders, they feed on the same type menu of plants as the adults. Now, here's the most common type of change in shape with insects is called complete metamorphosis. And this occurs with an egg and a larva. But notice there's a pupa stage, where this is a dormant, non-feeding, resting stage, where there's a complete change in shape of the insect. So each stage of complete metamorphosis, the animal looks different than at any of the other stages, which is not the same as the simple or gradual metamorphosis. So what we're going to see is here, we're going to see a lot of insects, the ants, the bees, the fleas, the flies, the wasps, beetles, moths. This is a large group of insects, larger than the other insects that go through gradual or simple metamorphosis. We do have an egg, but the immature stage is called a larva, not a nymph. So a nymph can look like the adult. It needs to grow wings. The larval stage of many of these insects will never look like the adult. It goes through a complete change in shape in the pupa stage. And here we have an example actually of an adult moth, which generally will have different feeding habits, preferences for food, or if it's a predator type insect, the larval stage could be feeding on plant material and then switch over to feeding on insects as an adult. Okay, where do insects go during the winter? How do they survive the winter, which is, I believe tomorrow, maybe the first day of fall. And I know winter will precede fall. And then generally we do not really see many insects unless they decide to come into your house. So insects can do two things to survive cold weather. They can migrate out of the area, or they can hibernate in the area. And they do something very unique. In entomology, we use the term overwintering. Is how an insect passes through the winter season. So they can overwinter in any stage of their development. It could be in the egg. A lot of insects will, adult females lay eggs and the adult female dies. Eggs are laid commonly in cracks and crevices of tree bark. It could be a larval stage. It could be in the ground, inside a leaf. It could be a pupa stage. A lot of moths will pupate after the nymph, the caterpillar stage, buries itself in the soil and then pupates, and or you could have a nymph, or it could be the adult insect. So any
I'm sorry, David. I just muted you by accident. I was trying to mute others that had their microphones
Oh,
open.
okay.
Sorry about
Well,
that.
can you hear me now?
Yeah, I thought it would mute everyone but the speaker, but just everyone,
Okay.
please keep your mics on mute.
Okay. Well, I'll continue
Yes,
gabbing here then.
yes, you can talk.
Okay. Thank you, Carla. Okay. Trying to move this slide. So how do insects survive winter? Environmental temperatures. What causes insect to seek out an area to hibernate in, or they know they need to move out of an area? Well, it's temperature, and it needs to be a gradual drop in temperature. A sudden drop in temperature could be lethal to insects. So we have, say, a sudden hard freeze. But it's the main thing is the length of day. And you can see when I look outside, the sun is setting earlier every day. And this also tells plants to go into a dormant stage too, the ones that drop the leaves. So if you're an insect that feeds on leaves of plants, your food source is going away for the winter. So there's no way you could survive through the winter without food. So it's a good thing that as plants do go into, basically, plants can't migrate, but they do, you might say, kind of hibernate. Insects follow suit and do the same thing, or they would starve to death. So, but insects can survive out really cold temperatures, because we have insects that survive in Canada, body black flies, mosquitoes, and gnats, and it gets much colder there than it does in Tennessee. So, insects use chemicals that serve to function as an antifreeze or glycerols, and what they do is they stop ice from forming inside the cell on the cellular level. Ice, when it forms sharp crystal type edges, and it could actually puncture through cellular membranes, and then that would lead to death of the insect. So insects need to experience a gradual change in temperature, so these glycerols, antifreeze, start developing. So that's what insects do. Good example of a few insects here that do overwinter. And how do they do this? Well, spider mites can overwinter as adult. The two-spotted spider mite, which is a major pest of many plants and our vegetable garden plants, the two-spotted spider mite overwinters as an adult, even as delicate and tiny as they are. Most other mites will overwinter during the egg stage. Aphids overwinter generally as eggs on trees and shrubs. Lace bugs, like azalea lace bug, adults die off, but not before eggs are laid on plant material. Bagworms overwinter after the female lays the eggs inside the bag, and she is a mature caterpillar, which is, you'll find that very interesting when we look at bagworms. Her body actually mummifies around the eggs and protects them during cold winter periods. Beetles generally are overwintering as adults, but they can, in an immature stage, as a larva inside, say, if they're a wood boring beetle inside a tree. A good example would be the emerald ash borer beetle, which attacks all ash trees. The adult beetles are not around. It is in the larval stage that it goes into a dormant stage inside the tree. Some other overwintering insects. We'll look at boxwood leaf miners. They are partially grown larvae inside the upper and lower surface of a leaf. That's a very unusual one. Rose sawflies, major problem in roses. They leave the plant as a mature insect, crawl down in the soil, dig a little area in the soil, and they pupate in the soil. In the spring, they come out again to feed on our roses. Most true bugs overwinter as adults. If you want to know where squash bugs do during the winter time, they don't do off as adults. They don't lay eggs to overwinter as adults. The eggs are only laid to hatch on squash plants that are actively growing. So the nymphs grow rapidly to an adult, and they overwinter in a lot of plant debris. So that's always a good idea to clean up all the plant debris out of a vegetable garden to lessen the chances and provide habitat, overwintering habitat for these type pests. Scale insects are very unusual insects. They generally overwinter as adult females, but a lot as nymphs or even in eggs. Now then there's another group of scale called soft scale that can overwinter as a second stage nymph. So it's interesting, depending on the type insect, it depends on what stage of growth they overwinter. Okay, this is what generally we're going to look at the rest of this program, ways in which insects injure plants. And if you grow a garden, you're just probably going to think that all insects eat plants. If you grow crops, you're going to think the same way. But again, as I stated earlier, most insects serve us humans, we think, as beneficial. They're not here to serve us. So, but we'd like to categorize them as beneficial, non-plant feeding insects. So we're going to look at signs and symptoms now. So first, how do insects even find the plants? If all plants look green, in an ocean of green, how in the world would you find, if you were a very specific plant feeder and not a generalist plant feeder, which would feed on a variety of plants, but maybe you are an azalea lace bug and you only feed on azalea. How do you find that azalea, those green leaf azaleas, when you see an ocean of plants that are green? Well, the theory is, and we think this is probably true, is it suggests that insects, they have to use visual cues to find plants. So now you think, well, that still is hard to do. Yes, but what they do is phytophagus just means plant feeding insects. They actually look for green, something green, like a plant. So they can ignore things that are dark in color, that are brown or a tan color, like your sidewalk or steps, the roof of your house, your car, unless you maybe have a green car, the soil, tree bark, which is generally gray, roads, which are asphalt, which is black. So they do single out things that are green. Then after that, they actually have to use chemicals. That's why they have the antennas. The insects don't have noses. They don't sniff out odors in the air. Their antennae are chemical sensors and much more acute than our noses. Our noses can only smell certain things, but insects can detect things miles away. And then some insects actually will land on plants with their feet and determine by scratching the surface of the leaf if the chemicals are right and that's the right plant. And that's actually butterflies. The term is called drumming, how they determine where to lay eggs on plants. And this happens rapidly. A butterfly can land on the leaf of a plant. They tap their feet and they scratch the surface of the leaf, allowing chemicals to escape. And then they can, actually they have type taste sensors in their feet like flies do, which is very interesting. And then they can determine the species of plant that their caterpillars need to feed on to go through complete change in shape. So it's pretty interesting that they do this rapidly, really quick. So insects differentiate plants based on actually their odors and how they taste. So here we go. First group of insects, and these are called feeding symptoms. The symptom is called stippling, and it looks like there's the little pin pricks. And actually, that's what happens. These insects have type of mouth parts that puncture the individual leaf cells, and they rupture through the cell wall and the membrane, and they suck out the contents. Air rushes in, and it gives this whitish, yellow, gray color appearance to the plant. Now, just as much damage is done as if an insect had actually done some chewing and start chewing the leaf up. The picture on the leaf is an azalea leaf and is severely injured. There's a lot of cells. I'd say probably more than 50% of the leaf surface has been destroyed, even though it's not been chewed. So white or yellow spots known as stippling result when these foliage feeding insects pierce the leaf tissue with their mouth parts and remove the cell sap. and that causes the cell to die and is not replaced by the plant. And good examples would be what we call it are true bugs, plant bugs, and then lace bugs, insects called leaf hoppers, but non-insects, which are actually arthropods in that big group, spider mites and little insects called aryaphiid mites. Aryaphiid mites are one of the type of mice that spreads rosette disease, so they're feeding. So the picture in the center is an arborvitae leaf, and it's been severely damaged by a spruce spider mite. Picture on the right is a laurel shrub, and it has been fed on by what we call a southern red spider mite. And it'll get to the point where the injury is so serious that there's no photosynthetic activity in these leaves in the plant. Then a lot of times will slow down their bloom period and have to grow out new leaves to replace the ones that are damaged. Excuse me, I'm gonna get a sip sometime, wet my whistle. So the most common type of insect that will cause stippling are the insects in the insect order called Hemiptera. Hemi meaning half, Ptera meaning wings. So they have a wing that the texture changes about halfway or third way through the wing. So that's why they're called Hemiptera insects. These are true bugs. They have 4 wings. The front pair are generally part of the wings. The larger wings are a little bit thicker and leathery at the base where they grow out of the wing base. But as the wing extends toward the tip, it becomes a softer membranous type material. All their mouth parts are formed for piercing and sucking, and the beak, which is we call it a beak, arises from the front part of the head. All insects that are in this order Hemiptera go through gradual change in shape. So here's how a true bug, this differentiates a true bug from other insects, say a beetle or a fly. The arrows point to this needle-like mouth part, which actually is hinged and folds into a groove on the underside of the insect. And when they want to feed this stylet, this proboscis, this beak-type mouth part can extend out. They can feed straight down. They can feed straight out. And by doing this, they puncture individual plant cells. They suck out the cell sap. Air rushes in. The cell is dead, and they just continually do this, do this, do this. So this is how a true bug causes plant damage we call stippling. And this is just an example of some variety of different true bugs. They come in an arrangement of colors and shapes. Some are pretty ornate looking, colorful. Some are kind of gray, dull colored. But what differentiates a true bug from other insects, the top left picture, you can see this could probably be a type of squash bug. The front part of the wing coming out of the wing pad is more leathery, and then down here it becomes more of a membrane. You can't tell, but their beak is underneath most of them have really tiny little heads. They have 4 wings. And this is just a small example of the different colors and body shapes of true bugs we call Hemiptera. So let's look at it's a good example, a really common one you need to know. This is the host plant is azalea, and the insect is named after that plant. So if you have a plant in your yard and there's an insect named after it, it is going to find that plant because it is a really specific feeder. The azalea lacebug only feeds on azalea. There actually is a rhododendron lacebug that feed on rhododendron. So you can see in this picture I took, the leaves are fading, and that's a sign right there that the plant is in some danger, starving to death, because now its ability to make food is really compromised. There's another picture I can see a lot of stippling. This is taken at a Central Region office in Nashville. If you look at the underside of a leaf of an azalea, now your first symptom is going to be this kind of off-white color, fading of the green. Now, when you look really close at the underside of the leaf, it would have these little black specks that looks like pepper. That's the fecal material. It's very sticky. And as the insects feed, they leave behind a pretty messy little plant. So this is caused by the azalea lace bug. They only feed on evergreen azaleas. Native azaleas, which are deciduous, don't have a problem with azalea lace bug. Because remember earlier in one of the slides, azalea lace bugs overwinter as eggs on leaves. So you got to have a broadleaf evergreen azalea to have this problem. They're active spring through autumn. The females then lay these little tiny eggs. They are incredible little vase-shaped egg. And these are little nymphs right here. They don't really have the ability to fly because their wings hadn't grown out very much. And very lacy wing. The adults are very, very tiny. This is the underside of the leaf, and here's a little spot of fecal material. Okay, another one I added to this program is because it's very common. If you grow really pretty garden phlox, I do, and I have just a tremendous issue with these, called the phlox plant bug. They like to feed on phlox. And in this one, you can see the phlox plant bug is feeding straight down into the leaf. They like to feed, the phlox plant bug loves the new growth. And so they're actually the terminal end of the leaf of the plant, the apex, the top of it. And they can introduce some toxic digestive type enzymes, which cause the leaves to distort and unfold and kind of interfere with the growth of the plant. They won't kill the plant, but if they make them tremendously unsightly looking and they don't grow very well. You get to the point you may actually come in and cut a lot of that plant out to get rid of those, throw those in a bag and dispose of them. If you're going to spray, you got to spray constantly for these, whether you're using synthetic or organic insecticides. So that's phlox plant bug. Very, very tiny. You can see one here. If you disturb the plant, they run or drop off the plant and hide. Another group of insects that are similar to the true bugs are in an insect order called Homoptera. And again, the word homo meaning the same. This refers to the wing, looks the same from the front to the back. So in the pictures on the bottom left picture is a cicada, a periodical cicada. The wing looks the same front and back. The next photo to the right is a little leaf hopper. The texture of the wing looks the same. The colorful pattern remains the same. A lot of these insects are pretty tiny, and a lot of these are responsible for spreading diseases to plants. For example, on our pin oaks, there's several leaf hoppers that spread a bacterial infection to a pin oak called bacterial leaf scorch, and it's a fatal disease of pin oaks. It will kill a large tree. So Homoptera insects, most of them have wings, but a few do not. Now, when they fold their wings, unlike the true bugs in the insect order Hemiptera, the Hemiptera insects fold their wings flat on their bodies. Homoptera fold their little wings kind of at an angle, like a little pup tent, we call it. They can't lay their wings flat. Again, their mouth parts are very similar to the true plant bugs, or they're formed for piercing, sucking out plant sap. All the Homoptera insects are plant feeders, and they go through only gradual metamorphosis, change in shape. So you can see there are some insects you're probably familiar with in this insect order. It's not a true fly, it's called a white fly. And mealybugs are in this order, and aphids are in this order, and scale insects are in this order. So it's quite a diverse order. Some of them have evolved to look like thorns on trees because they don't move very fast. Even they can jump and hop pretty quick. Ones that we call tree hoppers can mimic thorns on trees. So it's the type of disguise that they put on. So here's an example. Now, the difference between these insects and the true plant bugs, besides the way the shape of their wings, how they fold them, their mouth parts don't extend out from the front of their head. Their mouth part extends straight down. It's still a beak, and it's right below, directly below the eye, or behind the eyes in a usual position. They cannot extend their mouth part out straight. Okay, leaf hoppers. Some of them are extremely colorful, but again, you can see in the picture on the left, the little white arrow. These are tiny little insects sometimes, and they get on herbs, they get on garden plants, they get on your lawn, they get on trees. They don't kill plants, but they can sometimes introduce a deadly plant disease, maybe a viral disease infection that can kill a plant. And the picture on the lower right is a close-up again of the feeding symptom called stippling. Now, there's another group I'll show you later, which are not true insects that cause a lot of stippling, and they can easily get confused because the symptom looks very similar. This is typical leafhopper damage, very severe. You can see on the lower picture on the lower right is some herbs, could be rosemary, severely damaged, roses on the top right picture, and some other plants that get damaged by leafhoppers. Leafhopper populations usually build up mid to late summer into large populations of very, very tiny insects. Now, spider mites, we're still in the group of insects and non-insects that cause stippling. Spider mites are notorious for tearing up plants, and we're going to look at just a couple species. The main ones, three here, that cause most of the damage. One called the spruce spider mite. This is Arbovita. Now, you might think that Arbovita looks healthy, and it looks pretty healthy. But if you look at the top part is green, where the red area points to, it's fading, it's losing its color. So that's what you got to really key in on plants. If they look unsightly, even just barely unsightly, it could be a slow infestation building up of damaging insects. So this is going to be a very serious problem and need to stop it pretty quick. So spruce spider mite, in the lower right-hand picture, you can see a healthy foliage on Arbovita, severely injured leaf tissue here, stippling again. Now, a spider mite feeds by actually kind of scratching, rupturing the cell, and sucking up the contents. They are extremely, extremely tiny. This is the spruce spider mite. They prefer to feed on needle-leaf evergreen trees and shrubs, and their preference is Arbovita. They're a cool season pest, active in the spring and fall. They're not active during the hot summer months. They will overwinter in the egg stage. And if you have an early infestation of spider mite on Arbovita, you probably won't notice it in the spring. You may not notice it in the summer when they're not active. And then in the fall, the eggs hatch and you get a new population. Then that next spring, you might say, oh, my Arbovita is not looking very good. We've already had probably a whole season, couple of seasons of feeding injury. Horticultural oils are excellent, dormant oil, horticultural oil for controlling these. Now, if we go to the southern red mite, you're not going to find these feeding on needle-leaf evergreen plants, and you don't have to know the specific mite, but you should recognize, again, the symptom is called stippling. This is very common on laurels or broadleaf evergreen shrubs. Azaleas could have a problem with some mites. Any broadleaf evergreen shrub is susceptible. I've even seen shrubs that generally you see no signs of an insect, but you can see stippling on them. So this is southern red spider mites, as we call it. Severe stippling injury on this laurel. They're active at the same time the spruce spider mite. So southern red mite likes holly, azalea. They'll go to rhododendron, cherry laurel, all the laurels, cool season, spring and fall. Then we have a warm season mite called the two-spotted spider mite, and there are just thousands of species of mites. This spider mite will produce some silken webbing, and that's in a really severe infestation. This is a very tiny mite that can overwinter as what we call a gravid female. She is pregnant. She's ready to lay eggs. She will not lay eggs until the plants produce leaves in the spring. But as delicate as she is, she will get down into leaf litter just in the soil and survive, hibernate in that area. So you can see too, spotted spider mite, a lot of damage on tomatoes, beans, eggplant, a lot of our vegetable garden crops, along with landscape plants. And to show you that the temperature affects their development. Remember, even mites are cold-blooded creatures. And temperatures toward the summer days when it gets really hot, say 95 during the day, which we get a lot of in Tennessee, but the nights are not really cooling down, just a little around a difference of 18, 20 degrees. They can develop from an egg to an egg-laying adult female in a little over a week, 8.3 days. So you can have an infestation happen very rapidly. But when the weather starts cooling down, they don't like that. That slows their reproductive cycle down to almost a month. If the nights, if the days get down to 68 degrees Fahrenheit, 50 at night, you're not going to see any activity from two-spotted spider mite. But you know, the two mites we just talked about, that's the time, that's the temperatures they love. The cool season mites now come out. So you can have most of the growing season issues with mites, whether they're a cool season or warm season mite. So that was a group of insects and non-insects that cause a very common feeding symptom called stippling. Now we're going to look at one that most people can easily recognize: holes in the leaves caused by chewing insects, which are the results of beetles, weevils, which are a type of beetles, caterpillars, sawfly larvae. They do a lot of chewing on leaves because they have mandibles, chewing mouth parts. So we're going to look at an example here of a really common one. It's called a rose sawfly. Now notice the word sawfly is one word. This word will trick you. It's not a fly. It is actually a wasp. And I don't know why they didn't call it a rose wasp. I don't know. They called it a sawfly. Well, it's because the adult female can resemble more of a type of a little black fly than a wasp. And if the word fly was separate, if sawfly was two words, fly was separate, it would actually be a fly. But if the word fly is attached to saw, it's one word, it is not a true fly. So a good example, the common name of insects will kind of fool you. A lightning bug is one word. A lightning bug is not a bug, a true bug like a plant bug. Or a firefly. Firefly is one word, so it's not a fly. So what is a lightning bug? It's actually a soft-winged beetle. So don't go by the common name to describe the insect. So, but this is an insect in it goes through complete change in shape, metamorphosis, and it is very easy to mistake the immature stage as a caterpillar, but it is not a caterpillar. So the reason you should know that, if you were going to apply an organic product to control what you thought was a caterpillar feeding, and it was a BT product, it's a bacterium, organic products used, it would have no effect on these larval stage of these insects because they are not true caterpillars, even though they closely resemble. That is what the wasp larval stage of this insect looks like. And the feeding causes elongated holes that generally follow the leaf veins. The first type damage done is damage only to the underside of the leaf. The top layer of the leaf remains intact, but it dies, becomes kind of opaque. If you hold it up to the light will shine through it like a window. So we call this a window pane effect. So on the bottom right here is the adult female sawfly. And this is a bristly sawfly. And this is, we call them, sometimes you might call it, there's some we call slugs, or like an oak slug or a rose slug, even though it's not a true slug. They look slimy, but they're really not. They can only feed on the lower surface of the leaf. They can't chew a hole through the leaf because they're too tiny. The mouth parts are very small. As they grow and get bigger, they will chew holes in the leaf. These are the ones that overwinter in a pupa stage. They migrate off the plant. So this is very common because we plant a lot of roses and we have a lot of problem with rose sawfly. Okay, butterflies and moths, Lepidoptera. We talked about that insect order. They go through complete metamorphosis, change in shape. There actually are a few adult moths that have what we call a reduced wing or no wing at all. And we'll look at some of those too. There's always an exception in the world of entomology when it comes to insects. So the immature stage are known as caterpillars, and their mouth parts is designed for chewing. So moths can create a lot of havoc because any insect that has to go through complete change in shape needs a lot of food energy. And so caterpillars just eat, eat, eat. So let's look at a few examples of some caterpillars that they're not going to kill trees, but they can almost defoliate them or almost completely defoliate a tree. These are little called inchworms or cankerworms. And we talked about insects having 6 legs. On the picture on the left, the little caterpillar is actually holding on the front with their true legs, but the rear, they have what we call a couple pair of pro legs, which are little sticky legs because they have little hooks on them we call crochets. Now, if you look at the picture in the center, this is an adult female, and she, for some reason, I don't have an answer for this, she doesn't produce wings. So she will overwinter as the larval stage in the soil beneath the host tree when she was a caterpillar. And so she's waiting at the opportune time in this, generally in the spring, when the leaves start coming out again. And she will actually crawl up out of the ground because she can't fly. She has to crawl up the trunk of the tree to lay a mass of eggs. And then that leaf feeding starts. Now, these can cause a lot of damage to large trees. And here's an example of this tree is still around, and it was a huge hackberry tree, and it was almost completely. This was a massive tree in Nashville, almost completely defoliated. This tree is so big, and it was close to a parking lot on church property. You were not going to spray this because most of the spray would go in. We would never recommend spraying a tree like this. So we had a great solution, very inexpensive, simple solution to control this problem so they never have it again. And because this insect has to crawl up the trunk of the tree because she can't fly, she never grows wings. What we do is we put a material called tangle guard on the trunk of the tree, maybe 4.5, 5 feet up from the ground. And you could put it on this kind of a really light, heavy paper material called tangle guard wrapped around the tree. And then you smear on this really sticky glue-like substance. It's kind of clear, very similar to what is put on a sticky board, say to capture insects or brown recluse spiders. And as she crawls up the tree, she gets stuck in the sticky stuff. There's no chemicals used. And then her panic, she will release a pheromone, and that will attract the males to it. And then they get stuck. So there's no mating whatsoever. And then the problem is solved. So this is a good, really non-chemical way to control an insect because she can't fly, she has to crawl. And this type product can be found at garden centers and hardware stores. So here's how it's put on, and it's just smeared on. Don't touch it with your fingers. It is a sticky mess. But then you can dispose of it all after you come out one morning and look, and also be full of wingless female moths and winged male moths. Okay, another group of caterpillars, bagworms and tent caterpillars and fall webworms. And a lot of these times these get a little confused by people. So let's look at the bagworm. And I'm amazed that these people waited so long to call it an extension age to come look at the problem. When the back of the trees on the picture on the left, they look fine. For some reason the bagworms chose to feed on the front, and this is where they pull the car in. How could you not notice that? Only thing you can do this plant Probably get some green spray paint, spray grain, match up the same color as the rest of it. So how many bagworms can you see? You can't see the bagworm themselves, but you can see their bags. It is hard to count how many were in just this very small picture I took on this is the Arbovita. So what is inside that bag? This is a female. I actually had to, with scissors, cut through the silk bag. You can't tear one open with your fingers, hardly. It's almost impossible. Silk has stronger tensile strength than steel, and it's a waterproof, breathable type material, almost like Gore-Tex. So it serves a good way to camouflage, protect the female. And she's doing what she normally does without the bag. She just started feeding right away on this Arbovita. So see the picture on the left? There's one little tiny bag. So as these eggs hatch, and generally in the month of May, when the weather warms up and new plant growth appears, all that good that energy from the sun is in all the new foliage. That's what these insects want to feed on. They don't want to feed on the old growth. So the little caterpillar, when they hatch from an egg in May, they're about the size of a period. They're too tiny to see. You may not even notice the little bags either. But as they grow, they're either going to develop in a male or female. Now, the difference between the male and female is the male will actually go through complete metamorphosis and pupate into a little black flying moth. For the female, is the exception to the rule. Her growth stops. She does not develop into a moth, but a sexually mature caterpillar. And the reason for this, she wants to protect her offspring. She lays eggs inside the bag, not on plant material where they're vulnerable to predation by other insects or environmental damage from storms. So about mid-May to about mid-August, they'll feed. Then the male will come out, and you can tell the male bagworm there'll be a pupa case. The female does not have a pupa case. The male does, and extends out the bottom of the bag. And as he develops into an adult moth out of this, he will climb up to the top and let his wings dry out and expose them. And then he can fly and mate with her. And as he dies after that, and she starts producing eggs, and she dies, and so the eggs are well protected. So this will go on and on and on. And so it's best to try to control these either by pulling the bags off. And if you have a particular host plant like Arbovita, you got to watch out for bagworms. Tent caterpillars, generally, they're not going to, even with their extensive feeding, they may defoliate some trees, they're not going to kill the trees. One we want to look at is the eastern tent caterpillar on the bottom of that picture on the left. These are actually pretty caterpillars. The adults are moths. This is the eastern tent caterpillar. There's only one generation a year, but there are a lot of caterpillars produced. The female likes to lay this sticky egg mass on a little branch, a little twig on the tree. Basically, they like native black cherry trees, and about a pencil diameter twig, and there's this big egg mass, and it's just full of hundreds of eggs. And as they hatch in the spring, coincides with leaf development, they're going to stay to protect themselves. They're going to stay inside the silken bag, and it's always at a junction of the branch and a central leader. All the branches come together, unlike the fall webworm that goes out to the end of a branch. And so on a sunny day, they're going to leave the bag and feed. If it's overcast or the weather is not nice, they're not going to feed that day. They're going to stay in the bag. And then they will eventually mature, crawl down the tree, and leave. So here we go. They're getting ready to crawl down. And this picture on the right, this is taken, I took at Ellington Ag Center. These things are over 2 inches long, some almost 3 inches long. And in a day, they'll all crawl down and pupate somewhere, protected, maybe on another tree, on the ground, in a shrub, even on a building somewhere. And then they're gone. Generally, they don't require any type of chemical control. Now, the fall webworm, this is a webworm because they build a silken web, and it's attached at the end of a branch, and they enclose all the leaves that they want to feed on. Now, you can have several, there could be thousands of caterpillars in a tree, all in their own little web colony bag, so to speak. Uh, again, you won't see this develop. Generally, you don't notice this about midsummer. Now, they will also leave the host tree when they're mature caterpillars, and they'll pupate somewhere else. But that bag they'll leave behind. It's kind of like having a renter skip out on you in the middle of the night and leave your rental house in a big mess. And that's what they do. They skip out at night, leave the tree in a big mess. It doesn't hurt the tree, but it makes the tree look unsightly. Eventually, when the leaves fall off, the bags fall to the ground. It's just a big mess there. But they're not going to kill trees. And this is the fall webworm. Let's look at a few other leaf feeding symptoms before we take a break here. These are called leaf mines. By insects we call leaf miners. And a lot of these are flies, but they're unusual flies. Some are moths, and a few actually are beetles too. So you can see a serpentine type tunneling on this one. This is all done inside the leaf, the upper and lower surface. It generally doesn't kill the leaf. Can make some plants look unsightly, but there's only one that we really are concerned about because they can really stress a plant, and that would be the boxwood leaf miner. And this is a good example. Now, it may look similar to stippling, but you're not going to see all these little pinprick type holes. This is a picture I took. You'll see on the upper surface some loss of green color, kind of a circular area, not very, it kind of obscure looking. As the picture on the bottom left, you might see some larger yellow areas. Flip the leaf over on the other side. This is a picture I took many years ago. The leaf will have a blistered, puckered look. Now, inside these little dark brown areas is a single fly larvae. This is a type of a fly in the insect order Diptera. Now, this is a picture of that same leaf. I used a scalpel and cut open one layer of the leaf and peeled it back, and these are the nymphs of a fly. Now, you also know that the nymph name for a fly is called maggots too, so but I prefer to call them fly larvae. So they have actually feed all on the underside of this leaf. Now that leaf is going to die. Before the leaf dies in the spring, what they will do, they will poke their way out through the bottom of the leaf and pupate. They have a little pupa case. Now, this little pupa is developing rapidly into an adult. This is a little fly. Doesn't look like it, looks more like a mosquito in a way. But now the pupa case is actually just kind of like a little shell. It's empty. All this is done on the underside leaf. Now they'll go back to the same shrub they were on and mate, and the female then will go back timed just right when the new leaves come out. They will never go back to last year's leaves. They'll feed on the new leaves. Why? Because that's where most of the nutritious food is. And so you can have the same multiple generations returning to the same plant, and you got to intervene and stop this. So this is a boxwood leaf miner, very serious pest of boxwood. Okay, we'll look at twig and leaf galls, and then we'll take a short break here. These are unusual plant growth that occurs on plants, stimulated by insect feeding. So it's most of these do not hurt plants, even though some can if they become woody. Now, the difference between a leaf gall and a woody type gall is where the insect is actually feeding. If it's feeding on a leaf, the gall will be a softer material. So how does that gall start growing? As these insects feed in an immature stage, and so they could be, most of these are little tiny wasps, some of them are mites, and as they feed, their digestive enzymes chemically mimic plant growth hormones, so the plant gets kind of coerced into producing leaf cells, or cells that are on the stem or on the wood. So they don't turn into specific plant parts. You just get a lot of cellular reproduction growing. rapidly, and it forms a little hollow structure, a house, kind of like a little apartment or a condominium for the insect. So really, there's no serious damage to the leaf. Some of the leaves look ornamental in a way, but it's not really causing damage to the leaf. So the plant is actually pumping nutrients into the leaf gall as it would to all the leaf cells. And it allows the insects to develop and stay inside the gall and do no further damage to the leaf. So it's very interesting how this happens. Now, eventually, the plant shuts off the food supply and wants to kick the insect out. And it says, it's about time you left. So the timing is just right. It's timed just right that the insect goes through its complete change in shape, and it becomes a mature insect. As the gall matures and dries up and splits open, then the insects depart. So it's very interesting how this happens. We'll look at the inside of some of these galls. This is called a maple bladder gall, and this doesn't hurt the leaf. You would need a microscope to look inside one of these little bladder galls, and you would see what we call erified mites. They're almost microscopic. There'll be many inside a single maple bladder gall. These insects are called psyllids, and they're similar to the plant bugs. And this is called it's a hackberry nipple gall, and you might see most hackberries will have this issue, and it's only an issue. It's not a serious issue. Inside would just be one psyllid. This is an immature, and you notice it has no wings. This is the mature stage. Now, the overwintering stage is the mature stage. These can be a problem. They might find their way into your house. If you have a big hackberry tree and has a major problem with this, if the insect decides I can get into a screen that has a split inside your house on your window, it may decide it'd like to overwinter in your house. I've only seen this happen a couple of times. Most times they stay outside on the trees. This is called an oak apple gall, and this is a synipid gall wasp. They have a really enlarged abdomen, and it's a non-stinging wasp. And these structures allow food to be moved into the little structure where the insect actually kind of pupates in there. And then what they do is they chew a little hole, one wasp per gall. And it's a very unusual thing. You see it on oak trees. Oaks have a lot of different insect type galls on them. But it's obviously it's not an acorn. Does it cause any damage to the tree? None whatsoever. We don't really recommend any kind of chemical controls of these. But the woody galls can cause a lot of problem. And I know in Clarksville, Carlos saw this happen years ago. Trees were really stressed by an overabundance of they might have been gouty oak galls on some oak trees, and the trees had to be removed. They can cause limbs to start dying. So it's chemically it's about impossible to control them. It's unusual that tree has to be removed, but sometimes it will. Okay, we'll look at this one. This happened in my yard, and once I get calls on this, I want you to look closely so you can look and see that this type of injury, even though it's not fatal to the tree, not a serious problem, can be misdiagnosed as herbicide injury because of the curling of the leaves and the shape of the leaf is all distorted. But it does not affect the leaf's ability to produce plant food for the tree. And this mainly happens on an oak, a pin oak. It's called an oak vein pocket gall. And some little insects are actually living inside the leaf vein, which enlarges because of the feeding activity. And it's hard to see, but this is a really close-up shot of these little fly larvae, I believe, that are in here. So it's very interesting. It makes a tree look unsightly, like it has some severe herbicide injury, but generally might have this. I had this for a 2-year period, then it went away. So it's sometimes there's no control, no solutions needed. Let nature run its course, and the problem will correct itself. Now, these are the galls that I think Carla experienced on some oak trees. A couple of different types. This is a gouty oak gall. This is a horned oak gall. Underneath all these horns is again, these are little non-stinging wasps that create these, and there will be quite a few little tiny gnat-sized wasps inside these galls. Now they form on wood because that's where the feeding the enzymes are produced, that it tricks the tree and produce cellular woody tissue. And as this dries up, it does constrict, and the branches and twigs get girdled, and they can cause some severe damage to a tree. This is a tree that is still around at the Ellington Ag Center Central Region office, and it probably has a lot more of these galls. They really are easily seen during the wintertime when there's no leaves on the tree. But for the mowers, I kind of feel sorry for the mowers. They have a lot of little branches and limbs to pick up before they can mow, because every year the tree goes through a lot of branch dieback. So we'll take, say, Carlos, take a break here. And do I need to stop sharing? I don't know if you will put me on pause or.
Okay, you ready to take a break?
We'll take a little break here. Do I need to say stop share on my screen?
No, no, no. Just leave
You
that.
do it
I'll
all?
pause. Just remind me to hit the record button again when we come back.